display at Manila Fame. Now, this is an industry event that happens twice a year, showcasing furniture and decor items for the both for the domestic and foreign markets. And our primary audience, therefore, will be buyers and manufacturers of these categories of products. So, anticipating the virtues of a slightly superfluous position at Manila Fame, showing up at a market with nothing to sell, plenty to tell, we decided to exploit those liberties, ensured by the lack of pressure to perform. There were no targets to meet, no products to hawk. We simply had to fill a vacuum of our own creation. Our mission, therefore, was largely polemic, which the dictionary defines as creating a controversial argument, which is more or less what I live for. The definition of controversy is broadly contextual, of course, so promoting familiarity with disruptive technologies, that would be hardly threatening, say, to a community of industrial designers. But to a fragmented, largely craft-based industry, one that would, unfortunately, often rather copy than innovate, one historically resistant to investment in design and material research and manufacturing innovations, promoting the message that the future has arrived just a little bit earlier than they expected might well be unsettling. But our intention was not to disrupt aggressively. Rather, it was to gently promote a recognition in visually simple terms that material and creative advantages might accrue via the embrace of this new technology as it applied to their sectors. However, I and all of the participants are designers, and designers have their own interests, especially support of the notion that design is a medium for expression. We design because we have something to say, and we believe that customers are drawn to products imbued with meaning, and so we thought about how, why, and what we wanted to say. To that end, our structure became a kind of secular design studio that merged traditional academic liberties with the rigor of technological demands, as well as a market focus. So the challenge lay in balancing these not incompatible objectives to promote the evolution of discernible messages within a recognizable context. Rhea, who's in the back there, director of the Design Center, suggested two important considerations remain foundational to all of our efforts. One could be encapsulated in the word compassion, that feeling of deep sympathy for another person that remains central to the success of the social contract. The other referred to an understanding of our epoch as as an important historical moment, as yet another inflection point in an episodic, ongoing industrial revolution that began in the 18th century, when handwork gradually began to be supplanted by machines, whose efficiencies were supported by advances in science, engineering, design, and technology. The first iteration was largely dependent on steam and water, whose energy were captured to increase rates of production. Electricity, of course, was central to the second, while IT and computing the third. The fourth and current iteration seems to be increasingly driven by artificial intelligence and its applications. We also had to think about volume, the modulation of our message. We decided to go for loud, very loud, although not by audible means, but via scale. We wanted to shout out to the assembled political leaders, policymakers, designers, manufacturers, suppliers, and export to society, anybody who came down to Manila Fame. Hey, let us introduce you to these cool new devices that might actually help you recognize new ways to stimulate growth in our economy. So the brief presented to me by the Design Center envisioned this dialogue, a national dialogue that also broke free of the monopoly exercised by the capital cities. So we cast our net southward, inviting teams from Iligan City and Cebu to join colleagues from Manila in an exercise that ultimately promoted themes of social justice. The only firm demand was that the execution of the vision required the wielding of tools both old and new. Admission to the program, by the way, was via portfolio submission, as demonstrated experience in and commitment to design and creative work was central to the work that we would perform. Functionally, the event was formulated as training for the 8 participating teams. Each had 3 or 4 members. The first of the 4 parts was a 3-day conceptualization seminar where the teams developed the narrative. Their stories mostly took the form of social criticism. For example, imploring the rich and the comfortable to remember the poor, reminding society to filter out corruption, responding to human needs during natural disasters, empowering people to become their own heroes, and evoking spirits of ancient Philippine icons to serve as symbols of change. Because each story was unique, each outcome was also destined to become a thing of singular originality. The second part of the program comprised 3 days of technical training. It was there where the teams not only deepened their familiarity with digital fabrication technology, it was also when decisions were made regarding the materials, tools, and techniques to be deployed during the next part of the program, which was a month-long period of access to a variety of fab labs where construction transpired. The final moment of truth, the 4th part of the program, culminated with the installation and display of the output. Now, the hype surrounding digital fabrication touts 2 utopian characteristics: build anything anywhere, and eliminate the distance between design and fabrication. This shallow characterization, I think, oversells the present capacity of the more broadly acceptable variations of the technology and buys into a bit of a cartoonish vision of the future as a wholesale replacement for a familiar present. Because we know from the study of history that evolution, biological evolution, is gradual, and social evolution as well, and rarely progresses successfully at the rate of revolution. An organic accretion of new technologies, new policies, and new solutions would often be more likely to be integrated if they are allowed to gracefully prove their value to society before they are embraced or abandoned. So one concern is an overemphasis on technology. Not only are we looking at means of production, the cutting, the etching, the routing, the drilling, and the printing to be mediated by machine, but the materials themselves, those materials upon which digital fabrication is most effective, these are also product of industry like glass, acrylic, PVC, plywood, MDF. These are also separated from nature via their factory origin. So questions of authenticity, of the sort that may have been heard in Bauhaus studios, were debated as we wondered if we were supporting a process that took us farther and farther away from the simplicity of an unmediated palette plucked from the field, the forest, and the earth. One hope that was articulated in our discussions was that in the future, increasingly sophisticated digital fabrication could allow us to circle back to that array of natural materials, of wood, metal, hides, and ores, that humanity has always shaped into objects of great quality, utility, and value. This further led to the question, is digital fabrication the final nail in the coffin of local design? Can those roots, if they are removed from the terrain, resist the temptation to wither on the vine? So in this regard, our Digital Artisans program was a testing ground for relevance and even as an aesthetic experience. The question of whether we designers want to see the act of shaping, forming, and joining, of translating those lines and forms and stipples and shades and shadows into the tangible realities they represent, this gave pause and led to thoughtful ruminations about the work of the hand and its value, the work of the mind and its value, the work of the machine and its value, and finally the amalgamation of all of these into a coherent whole. We designers make use of impulses shaped by our conscious and unconscious identities. If we try, we can concretize through design the expression of our memories and experiences, our fears, hopes, aspirations, and ambitions. The process of design forces people to ask themselves profound questions. What are my core beliefs? A designer might ask. What distinguishes me from others? What is my unique role? These challenges help direct the vectors of our design work by elevating our efforts towards a level of existential authenticity that produces relevance in our work. But now designers also have to ask, what is my relationship to the machine? To this machine, this digital fabrication machine? Is it a soulless device of impeccable precision? A robot incapable of making a mistake and as such utterly alien to my humanity? Do I really want to welcome this creature into my world? Now, design can be mute. It's an expression of inarticulated impulses that are appreciated as birds of color, geometries of form, interaction between the parts and pieces of the thing itself. So we decided to challenge ourselves in a way that began with a vague function, but quickly ran away from the specificity. So even though architects were on our team, our objective was not architecture. Even though industrial designers were on our team, our objective was not an efficient object. Although artists were on our teams, our objective was not the pure impulse of art. Instead, we nibbled at the edge machine-controlled machines and materials that are exactly the same around the globe. Then it's pretty obvious that digital fabrication is not an ally of localism. Organic design, that which springs inevitably from the particularities of a given space, can be expressed via local products and local craft traditions. And this tradition may well be threatened if digital fabrication dominates. Thank you for that, digital fabrication. But on the bright side, design is a form of research. It's an activity that can in some ways be analogized to scientific inquiry because an objective must be stipulated, the process of investigation concretized, and options weighed and conclusions drawn on the basis of evidence that is created. So it's in that area that a seamless relationship between the pencil and the computer and the digital making devices really seems weighty and pertinent. This capacity for the rapid visualization of the many three-dimensional iterations of design has enormous implications for the research and design phase of our work. At the same time, the increasingly broad-based access to advanced 2D and 3D representational technology also represents an opportunity to challenge and even make obsolete the traditional vertical relationships within the workplace. So when the staff, even the junior staff, are armed with radical levels of expertise, a more democratic paradigm might be made possible when you can drive the digital wagon. To conclude, the journey I took with these 8 groups of designers from around the country proved how optimism, a quest for meaning, and a commitment to creativity, as well as an interest in finding new and pertinent strategies for translating the abstraction of design into the reality of a product, all of those old-fashioned, even ancient interests of creative people can, I think, be well served when married to this thoroughly contemporary means of making. And now we're going to show you a short video that highlights the end products of our investigation. Thank you so much.